There is a specific kind of being seen. Not the professional scene of a performance review, not the social scene of a crowded room, the quiet kind. The kind that happens when someone is paying attention to you when you do not know you are being watched. When someone has been observing the ordinary details of your daily life with a care and a consistency that, when you finally notice it, does not feel like invasion. It feels like something else entirely. Something that takes a moment to name. I caught my neighbor watching me on a Tuesday in September. Not dramatically, not in any way that announced itself as significant. I was in my kitchen making coffee at 7 in the morning, standing at the counter in the specific unself-conscious way you stand in your own kitchen when you believe you are entirely alone, and I looked up. And there he was. Across the courtyard, second floor, the apartment directly opposite mine, standing at his window with a coffee cup in his hand and his eyes on me. He did not look away immediately. Neither did I. And in the moment before he did look away, before he registered that he had been seen seeing me and the specific complicated thing happened on his face that I will come back to, I felt something that I did not expect to feel about a stranger in a window. Recognition. My name is Alex. I was 29 years old. And the man in the window was named Will. And this is the story of what happened between two people in adjacent apartments in a Portland, Oregon courtyard building, over a summer and a fall and a winter, beginning with a Tuesday morning and a coffee cup and a look that did not immediately look away. The building was called Courtyard Arms, which was the kind of name that a 70s Portland apartment building would give itself and then spend 50 years not quite living up to. It was a U-shaped building, two wings of apartments facing each other across a central courtyard that had aspiration writ all over it, an execution that varied depending on how motivated the current building manager was about the garden beds. The current building manager, a woman named Gloria who had been there since the building was new, and who ran it with the specific benevolent authoritarianism of someone who had seen everything twice, was moderately motivated. The garden beds had lavender, the courtyard had a bench. The courtyard had in late summer the kind of ambient peace that urban courtyards occasionally achieve. I had moved in 14 months earlier. After the breakup, not a dramatic breakup, not a crisis, the specific quiet ending of a 4-year relationship that had been real and had run its course, I had needed somewhere new, not a new city, a new space. The kind that was mine in a way that the apartment I had shared with Marcus had not been mine in the end. The Courtyard Arms was mine. 3rd floor, east wing. The kitchen window faced west into the courtyard. The living room window faced the same direction. I had spent 14 months building a life in this apartment that was small and specific and exactly what I needed after the 4 years and the ending. I did not know when I moved in that the apartment directly opposite, 2nd floor, west wing, was occupied by someone who would become the most important person in my life. I did not know because I had not looked closely at who lived there. I noticed the apartment the way you notice things in peripheral vision, present, registered, not examined. A light on in the evening. A figure sometimes visible through the window. The ordinary background presence of a neighboring apartment in a building where neighboring apartments were visible. I had not examined it until September. Until the Tuesday morning with the coffee. William Nakamura. I did not know his name on Tuesday. I learned it later from Gloria, who dispensed building information with the specific calculated generosity of someone who knew everything and chose what to share. He was 32, Japanese-American, 3rd generation, originally from Seattle. He had been at the Courtyard Arms for 2 years longer than me. He worked as a translator, literary translation, Japanese to English, the specific slow, careful work of moving a text from one language into another without losing the thing that made it the text it was. He worked from home. This explained the window. A person who works from home in an apartment overlooking a courtyard will naturally know the rhythms of the courtyard, the comings and goings, the patterns of the neighbor's days, not from surveillance, from the ordinary ambient awareness of someone whose workspace faces outward. I learned all of this later. On Tuesday, standing in my kitchen with my coffee, I knew none of it. I knew only the face. Which was not what I expected. I am not sure what I expected from a peripheral vision figure in an opposite window, something less specific, less present. His face, in the moment before he looked away, was the face of someone who had been caught doing something they had not planned to be caught doing, and whose response to being caught was not guilt but something more complicated than guilt. Something that looked like a person who has been keeping a secret and is suddenly standing in the fact of it. He looked away. I finished making my coffee. I went to work. I thought about the face for the rest of the day. I became more aware of the window. Not because I was watching or not deliberately, but the awareness of the opposite apartment had been activated by Tuesday, and once activated it was difficult to deactivate. I saw him. Not dramatically, the ordinary sightings of two people living in adjacent apartments in a building that faced inward. The kitchen light on at 7, the figure at the desk, visible at a certain angle from my living room, working, the occasional appearance at the window which was different from the Tuesday appearance, the appearance of someone checking the courtyard rather than observing it. He was careful after Tuesday. This was the thing I noticed. He was careful in a way that suggested he was aware of having been seen and was adjusting accordingly. The window appearances were briefer. The angle was different, further from the glass, less visible from outside. He knew I had seen him, and he was trying to be more discreet. This made me not angry, something else, something that took a moment to identify because it was not what I expected to feel about a neighbor being careful not to watch me. It made me sad. The specific sadness of someone who recognizes the behavior of a person managing something. The careful management of a feeling that is being treated as something that should not exist or should not be visible. I had managed feelings for years. I recognized the management. On Thursday, I was in the courtyard. I came down to retrieve a package from the courtyard mailbox. One of the building's quirks, the courtyard mailbox that required going outside rather than just checking a hallway box. It was 7 in the evening and the courtyard had the specific quality of an autumn evening, the light going gold, the lavender in Gloria's garden beds doing its late-season thing, the air cooler than it had been. I looked up at the West Wing's second floor. He was at the window. He had not seen me come into the courtyard. He was looking at something, the garden, the lavender, the bench, with the specific quality of someone who was simply present in a moment of quiet. Then he looked up. He saw me. And we were in the same configuration as Tuesday, both of us looking, the courtyard between us. I raised my hand. Not a wave exactly, more of an acknowledgement, a registered. He looked at me for a moment. Then he raised his hand back. Small, brief, the acknowledgement returned. I took my package and went inside. I stood in my hallway for a moment. Then I went to my kitchen and made dinner, and the courtyard was quiet outside the window and the West Wing's second floor was lit, but the figure was not visible, and I thought about the raised hand and what it meant. We met in person on a Saturday. The Courtyard Arms had a shared laundry room in the basement, one of the building's communal spaces that produced the specific accidental sociability of shared infrastructure. You ran into your neighbors in the laundry room. You learned things about each other that you would not have learned otherwise. I went down at 10 in the morning with my basket. He was already there. Standing at one of the machines, loading it with the absorbed quality of someone who had not expected company. He turned when I came in. The face from the window. In person, closer, different from the window version in the specific way that people are always different from their window versions, more there, more detailed. The specific brown eyes and the dark hair and the quality of someone who had been inside with their work for several days, and was doing laundry as the practical acknowledgement that the week required management. He looked at me. Hi, he said, with the specific quality of someone who knows this is not a neutral encounter, who knows that the person standing in the doorway has a context that the laundry room does not account for. Hi, I said. I set my basket down. We did not speak while I loaded my machine. The laundry room had the sound of two machines running and the specific quality of a shared space that does not require conversation but makes silence feel more present. I'm Will, he said. I looked at him. Alex, I said. He looked at his machine. I owe you an apology, he said. For what? I said. He looked at me. You know for what, he said. I looked at him. I'm not angry, I said. You should be, he said. I was, he stopped. I was watching you more than once, I'm aware that's. Will, I said. He stopped. I'm not angry, I said again, but I am curious. He held the laundry basket. Curious about what, he said. About why, I said. What were you looking at? He was very still. You, he said, directly, with the specific quality of someone who has decided that honesty is the only available option. Why me, I said. He looked at his machine. Because you make coffee every morning, he said, and you're in the kitchen and you don't know anyone is watching and he stopped. You're very ordinary in a way that I find, another stop. Find what, I said. Impossible to stop looking at, he said, quietly, with the specific quality of someone admitting something they have not said out loud before. The laundry room, the two machines, the Saturday morning. Will, I said. I'm sorry, he said, that's. Have coffee with me, I said. He looked at me. What, he said. When the laundry is done, I said, come upstairs, have coffee, we can be ordinary together and you don't have to watch through a window. He stared at me. That's not, he stopped, you're not angry. I told you I wasn't, I said, have coffee with me. He looked at his machine, at me, at the basket. Okay, he said. Okay, I said. We did our laundry. He followed me upstairs at 11:30 with his laundry basket and the specific quality of someone who has agreed to something and is not entirely sure what they have agreed to. I made coffee, the same coffee, in the same kitchen at the same counter where he had been watching me on Tuesday morning. And there was something in the window becoming the room and the observed becoming the shared, that I felt in the specific place where things feel before you have words for them. He sat at my kitchen table with his coffee and he looked at the courtyard through my window rather than his own, and I thought, the view is different from in here, the view is always different from inside. He sat at my kitchen table like someone who was aware of being in the specific location of the thing that had been observed, and was processing that awareness in real time. The kitchen from inside was different from the kitchen from across the courtyard. Of course it was, but I watched him register the difference. The way the window looked from here, the way the courtyard was visible from this angle, the way the ordinary morning light fell into the space differently than it appeared from outside. What do you see, I said, from here? He looked at the window. The lavender, he said, I can't see the lavender from my window, it's at the wrong angle. Gloria planted it 2 summers ago, I said. I know, he said, I watched her plant it, a pause from my window. I looked at him. He looked at his coffee. You watch the courtyard a lot, I said. I work from home, he said. Translation, literary translation. The work is very interior, you're in the text for hours, the courtyard is, he stopped. Is what, I said. Is the world, he said. When the text gets too interior, when I need to remember that I am in a physical location and not just inside a language. He paused. I watched the courtyard, the mailbox and the lavender and Gloria's garden maintenance schedule, and he stopped again. And me, I said. Yes, he said. When did you start, I said. He held his coffee. About 2 months after you moved in, he said, 14 months ago. I looked at him. 14 months, I said. I know, he said, it sounds. Tell me what you saw, I said. He looked at me. What? In 14 months, I said, what did you see? He was quiet for a long moment. You moved in with boxes, he said. A Saturday in July you made 3 trips to your car, you went in the wrong door the first time and came back out and went around to the right entrance. He paused. You left the boxes in the courtyard overnight because you ran out of energy. Gloria brought them in and left them at your door. I didn't know she did that, I said. She did, he said. She does things like that. He looked at the courtyard. You went to work every day, you came home at different times depending on, I don't know, the workday. You started doing yoga on your balcony in September, that first September, and you stopped in October when it got cold and started again in April. I looked at him. He was looking at the courtyard. You had someone over in the first month, he said. A few times and then you didn't, and after that you seemed, he stopped. Seemed what, I said. More yourself, he said, like the apartment became more yours when it was only you in it. I held my coffee. His name was Marcus, I said. We broke up, that was why I moved here. I know, he said. I mean, I didn't know the name, I knew something had ended and you were starting over. You could tell, I said. You could see it, he said. In the way you moved through your kitchen, the first weeks you were careful, like the space wasn't quite yours yet, and then it became yours and you stopped being careful. He looked at his coffee. That's when I started watching more than the courtyard. I looked at him. Will, I said. I know, he said, I know how this sounds. How does it sound to you, I said. He looked at me. Like a person who was lonely, he said, who found something in a window that made the loneliness feel different, less total. He paused. That's not an excuse, it's the explanation. I held this. How long have you been lonely, I said. He looked at the courtyard. Since Seattle, he said, since I moved here. A pause. I moved for a relationship. The relationship ended. I stayed because the work was here and I didn't have the energy to start over somewhere else. How long ago, I said. 2.5 years, he said. And you've been watching the courtyard for 2.5 years, I said. Yes, he said. And watching me for 14 months, I said. Yes, he said, quietly, with the complete honesty of someone who is not going to manage the uncomfortable truth of a thing that has been true for a long time. I looked at him across my kitchen table. Will, I said. Yeah. I'm glad I looked up on Tuesday, I said. He stared at me. What, he said. I'm glad I looked up, I said, because otherwise we would still be two people in adjacent apartments and you would still be watching through a window and I would still be completely unaware of you, and I would rather be here. He looked at me with the brown eyes. Why, he said. Because you have been paying attention to the ordinary details of my life for 14 months, I said, and no one has paid that kind of attention to the ordinary details of my life in a very long time. I paused. And because you described what you saw with more accuracy and more care than most people who know me in person could manage. He held his coffee. You're not angry, he said for the third time. No, I said, I stopped, found the right word, I'm interested. He looked at me. Something in his expression. Something that was not the window version of his face or the laundry room version. Something that was the beginning of a different version. Alex, he said. Yeah. I don't know how to do this, he said, this, whatever this is. Me neither, I said, but I know how to make more coffee, so let's start there. October. We met in the courtyard for the first time, not accidentally, deliberately. I came down to sit on the bench and read, and I had texted him because we had exchanged numbers after the laundry room Saturday and the exchange felt natural and right. He came down with his own book. We sat on the bench in the October afternoon and we read, side by side, without talking much, the specific comfortable quality of two people who have discovered that they can be silent together and the silence is not absence of connection but its own form of it. He read a novel he was translating in Japanese. The pages covered in his pencil marks, the notes of someone who was working through language with the specific attention of someone for whom each word was a decision. I read something in English and occasionally watched him read in Japanese and thought about the specific act of translation, the moving of a thing from one language to another without losing the thing that made it the thing it was. What does that feel like? I said at one point. He looked up. Translation, he said. Living inside two languages at once, I said. He considered this. Like being in a room with a window, he said. The room is one language, the window shows you another. The translation is the act of carrying something from one side of the glass to the other without breaking it. I looked at him. Without breaking it, I said. Most things survive, he said. Some things don't. The job is figuring out which is which. We went back to our books. The lavender was past its season but still present, the dried stems with a specific quality of their own. The courtyard in October, the bench, two people and their books. I was aware of him beside me in the specific way that you become aware of someone when they have moved from peripheral to central. The way the details of a person accumulate until they are familiar, the way familiar becomes something else. November. I knocked on his door for the first time. He opened it and his apartment was not what I had imagined from the window. The window had shown me a person at a desk. The apartment showed me the world around the person at the desk. Books, more books than I had ever seen in a domestic space outside of a library. Not displayed, lived with. The specific accumulation of a person who reads and works and reads and works, and the two activities are not separate. His desk was covered in the organized way of someone whose disorder was actually a system. The translation he was working on pages in Japanese, his legal pad of notes, his English draft, arranged with the specific logic of his process. Art on the walls. Prints, mostly Japanese woodblock prints, and one large painting that was abstract and that I would ask about and that he would tell me was by his grandmother who had painted until she could not and was the most valuable thing he owned. Plants fewer than my apartment, chosen more carefully, the specific plants of someone who had thought about each one. You have plants, I said. You sound surprised, he said. You never water them in view of the window, I said. He looked at me. Then he smiled. The first full smile I had seen from him, the one that arrived completely, that changed his face entirely. There on the east side, he said, away from the courtyard window. Smart, I said. Paranoid, he said, with the self-awareness of someone who could laugh at their own careful management of their private life. I came in. He made tea. We sat in his apartment surrounded by his books and his grandmother's painting and his plants on the east side, and the translation spread across his desk, and I felt the specific quality of being in someone's actual space rather than the version of them visible through a window. More of him in every direction. December. We had been meeting for 2 months. Coffee, the courtyard bench, his apartment, my apartment, the specific alternation of two people building something in the space between their lives. Neither of us had named what it was. This was partly my caution and partly his, and partly the specific quality of something that was building correctly, not being rushed, not being forced into a category before it was ready to be in one. But December produced the nomming. It was a Saturday evening. We were in my apartment, eating dinner that I had made, the third time I had cooked for him, the specific domestic rhythm of two people who were feeding each other in the alternating way of something that had become daily, and he was quieter than usual. Not unhappy quiet, thinking quiet. I had learned the difference. Will, I said. Yeah. What are you thinking about? He held his wine glass. The text I'm working on, he said. There's a scene between two men. The original is in Japanese and the author is very spare. The way the feeling is communicated is almost entirely through what is not said, the space between the sentences. He paused. And I've been working on how to carry that into English, because English is not as comfortable with the space between sentences. English wants to fill the space. I looked at him. What is the feeling, I said, that the space is carrying? He looked at his wine. That one person loves the other, he said, and has been afraid to say it, and is, in this scene, beginning not to be afraid. The apartment, the December evening, the dinner between us. Will, I said. He looked at me. Are we talking about the translation, I said. He held his wine. A long pause. No, he said. I looked at him. How long, I said. Since the 3rd week, he said. After you moved in. Since I watched you come home one evening and you sat on your balcony for an hour in the dark and I didn't know why and I wanted to ask and I couldn't because we had never spoken and he stopped. And I understood then that what I was feeling about the person across the courtyard was something that required a word, and the word was more than interested. I held my wine. Why were you sitting on the balcony in the dark, he said. Marcus had called, I said, for the last time. We had the last conversation, and I sat on the balcony after because the apartment felt very quiet. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't know you were there, I said. I know, he said. I wanted to tell you, even then, that someone was there, that you weren't completely alone in the dark. He paused, but I was a stranger in a window. I looked at him. Will, I said. Yeah. You're not a stranger anymore, I said. He looked at me. No, he said, I'm not. So I said. So he said. The dinner between us, the December evening, the courtyard outside the window and his apartment with the east side plants directly opposite. I have been aware of you, I said, since the Tuesday in September, not the way you were aware of me, not with the same timeline, but since Tuesday I have been, I stopped, found it. I have been wishing the courtyard was smaller. He looked at me. The courtyard is not that large, he said. No, I said, it's really not. He put his wine glass down. He leaned forward. And I leaned forward. And the courtyard, which was not that large, became irrelevant. We sat at my kitchen table for 2 more hours after that, not talking about the translation or the courtyard or the September Tuesday or the 2.5 years of his loneliness or the 14 months of his watching. We talked about everything else. The way you talk when someone has finally become the whole of what they were always going to be to you, and you have the specific relief of not having to manage any more what you feel about them. At 11:30, he said he should go home. He lives directly opposite. The going home was a formality and we both knew it, and it made us both laugh. And the laugh was the best sound the apartment had produced since I moved in. At the door he stopped. He said, "Alex." I said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm glad you looked up," and I said, "I'm glad you were there to look at." And he went down the hall to the elevator, and I closed my door and I stood in my kitchen and I looked out the window at the apartment directly opposite, and the light was on and the figure was visible at the desk. And for the first time in 14 months, the figure in the window turned and looked back. January in Portland is its own specific experience. Not the dramatic cold of Chicago or Boston, not the snow that makes winter romantic in retrospect if not in practice. The specific persistent gray of a Pacific Northwest January, the rain that is more mood than event, the sky that is not threatening but is constant, the city existing in a quality of light that is neither day nor night but a sustained in-between. Will loved it. This was one of the things I learned in January. He had grown up in Seattle, which produced in him a specific relationship with persistent gray that was not tolerance but actual preference. He said, "The gray is honest. It doesn't promise what it can't deliver." I said, "That's a very specific endorsement of gloomy weather." He said, "It's not gloomy, it's consistent, there's a difference." We had that conversation in my kitchen on a Sunday morning in January. He had stayed not for the first time. The staying had happened gradually in the specific way that things happen gradually between two people who are both careful and both ready, first until late, then until very late, then one December Saturday not at all. The building knew. Buildings like the Courtyard Arms know. The community of a small building is its own specific social environment, with its information networks and its awareness of the changing configurations of its residents. Gloria knew before the new year. I know this because she appeared at my door in January with a dish of something she had made, Korean japchae, which was her mother's recipe and which she made when she wanted to communicate goodwill, and said, "I'm glad the building suits you." She said it with the specific meaningfulness of someone who was saying more than the sentence. I said, "The building has good neighbors." She smiled and went back downstairs. He showed me the translation in February. Not the whole of it, it was not finished. But the scene he had described in December, the scene between the two men and the space between the sentences, the feeling carried in what was not said. We were at his desk. He had the Japanese original and his English draft, and he walked me through the scene the way you walk someone through a piece of music, not just the notes but the intention, the decision behind each choice. "Here," he said, "in the original this sentence ends and there is no transition to the next. The white space on the page does work. The reader is meant to feel the time passing in the gap." "And in English," I said. "In English the temptation is to fill it," he said, "to add a sentence that explains what happened in the gap, but that kills the gap, that takes the thing the reader was supposed to feel and hands it to them pre-digested." He looked at the draft. "So I leave it. I trust the English reader to feel the gap the way the Japanese reader feels it." I looked at the two texts side by side. "Do they?" I said, "feel it?" "My editor says yes," he said. "She said it made her stop, that she sat with the gap for a moment before she continued." "That's what it's supposed to do," I said. "Yes," he said. I looked at the scene. Two men, a gap, a feeling carried in the space between sentences. "Will," I said. "Yeah. This is about us," I said. He looked at me. "Parts of it," he said, "the feeling of being in a space between things, of something being present and not yet named." He paused. "I was working on this in October, when we were on the bench, when the translation was also what I was living." "And now," I said. "Now the gap is filled," he said. The sentence continued. I looked at him. "Is it a good sentence?" I said. He looked at me with the brown eyes. "The best sentence I've translated," he said. The spring. April. Portland in April remembers what it is. The gray lifts, not completely. Portland is not a complete lift city, but sufficient warmth, sufficient light. The courtyard's lavender, which had been dried stems through the winter, began showing new growth. Gloria noticed before anyone else and communicated this discovery to anyone who would listen. Will and I were in the courtyard when she pointed it out. We were on the bench, our bench, which is how we had come to think of it, with the unself-consciousness of two people who have claimed a space through repeated occupation. He had his translation notes. I had a book. the Saturday afternoon that had become the Saturday afternoon. Gloria pointed at the lavender with the specific satisfaction of someone whose garden had survived another Portland winter. Coming back, she said. It always does, Will said. She looked at us on the bench. You two look good, she said, in the specific way of a building manager who has been watching two people find each other in her building and is pleased about it. Thank you, Gloria, I said. She went back to her garden assessment. Will looked at me. Coming back, he said. Always does, I said. He reached over and took my hand. The bench, the courtyard, the April afternoon with the lavender coming back. I thought about the window. The specific series of windows that had led to this bench and this hand and this afternoon. His window, mine, the glass between us, the view from inside being different from the view from outside, the translation carrying a thing from one side to the other without breaking it. The thing had not broken. May. He told me about Seattle in May. Not the city, the person. The relationship that had brought him to Portland and had ended and had left him in the apartment opposite mine for 2.5 years with the courtyard as his only reliable outward view. His name was Thomas. They had been together for 3 years. They had moved to Portland together for Will's translation work, which had been better served by Portland's literary community than Seattle's. Thomas had disliked Portland in the specific way of someone who had never fully arrived in a place. He had been physically present and emotionally elsewhere, and the elsewhere had eventually produced a conversation that produced an ending. He wanted to go back to Seattle, Will said, and he stopped. You didn't, I said. I didn't want to go anywhere, he said. I wanted to stay, the work was here, the people were here, I had built something, he paused. I had built something in the apartment, in the translation, in the building, in the courtyard. He looked at the lavender, in the watching the courtyard. And he went, I said. He went, he said, and I was alone with the courtyard. And then I moved in, I said. 14 months later, he said, and you moved in with your boxes on a Saturday in July and you went in the wrong door and Gloria brought your boxes in and, he stopped. And you started watching, I said. I started watching the courtyard, he said, and the courtyard had you in it. I held his hand. Will, I said. Yeah. I'm glad you didn't go back to Seattle, I said. He looked at me. So am I, he said. And I'm glad I went in the wrong door, I said. He looked at me. What, he said. Gloria saw me because I went in the wrong door, I said, and she came out to direct me, and she told me about the building, and she told me about the courtyard, and she told me, she said, the building has good neighbors, and I thought she was just being kind. He looked at me. She wasn't just being kind, he said. No, I said, she was being accurate. He squeezed my hand. The May afternoon, the courtyard, the lavender in full bloom now, the winter recovery complete. September. 1 year from the Tuesday. I made coffee at 7 in the morning. I stood at the kitchen counter in the specific unself-conscious way you stand in your own kitchen. I looked up. His window, West Wing, second floor. He was there. He was not trying to be discreet. He was not managing his visibility. He was standing at his window with his coffee cup and looking at me with the specific directness of someone who has stopped treating the thing they feel as something that should not be visible. I raised my hand. He raised his back. I pointed at my door. He nodded. He was at my door in 4 minutes. I handed him a coffee cup before he was fully inside. 1 year, I said. 1 year, he said. We stood in my kitchen with our coffees and the courtyard visible through the window behind us. What did you see, I said, just now from your window? He looked at me. You, he said, making coffee in your kitchen, exactly as you were a year ago. And I said. And this year, he said, I don't have to watch through a window. No, I said, you don't. He set his coffee down. He put his hands on my face. The specific weight of them. The gesture that I had come to know as his, the way he said things with his hands that were too large for words. Alex, he said. Yeah. The translation is done, he said, the publisher has it, it will be published in the spring. I know, I said, you told me. The dedication, he said. I looked at him. He had not told me about the dedication. What does it say, I said. He looked at me. For A, he said, who made the ordinary extraordinary by looking up. I held this. I said. Alex, he said. I looked at him. Will, I said. Yeah. I love you, I said. The first time said clearly, at full volume, not in the space between sentences. He looked at me. I know, he said, I've been watching. I laughed. He laughed. And we were in my kitchen in September with the courtyard outside the window and the lavender in the garden beds and the bench that was ours and the two apartments that had become, gradually and then completely, one life. I want to tell you about the window. Not his window, not mine, the idea of the window. Will translates things. He takes something that exists in one language and carries it into another. He works in the space between, in the gap, in the white space, in the room with the window that shows the other side. His whole professional life is the act of standing at the glass and deciding how to carry something through without breaking it. He watched me through a window for 14 months. Not with invasion. With the specific lonely attention of someone who had found in the ordinary details of another person's life something that made the loneliness feel different. The coffee at 7, the yoga on the balcony, the boxes on a Saturday in July, the evening on the balcony in the dark after the last phone call with Marcus. He saw all of it. And when I looked up on that Tuesday in September and found him there, and when his face did the thing that was not guilt but something more complicated, I saw it too. The person who had been paying attention. The person who had been carrying something through the glass. Without breaking it. That is what love looks like, I think. In its quiet version, not the dramatic declaration or the grand gesture, the person who has been noticing the ordinary details. Who can tell you the specific morning you needed someone there and they were, even when you did not know it. Who carries the thing through the glass, through the window, through the gap, through the white space between the sentences without losing what made it the thing it was. He carried it. I looked up. And everything from that Tuesday forward was the translation of what had always been on the other side of the glass. Now brought through. Now here. In the room. Without breaking.